The man drove home that late afternoon with the hum of his truck echoing down the quiet suburban road, his mind tired from work but eager to rest. The sun was still hanging low, painting the sky orange as he turned into his driveway. Everything looked normal, the trimmed grass, the neat sidewalks, the quiet houses with their painted fences. Yet something felt off even before he reached his front door. He saw a small white envelope tucked under the doorknob, the seal marked with the HOA logo. He frowned, parking quickly and walking up the steps. He pulled the letter free, the paper stiff and official, his name printed across it. He tore it open with his thumb, reading the bold first line, Notice of Violation. Unauthorized vessel, community safety risk. His brow furrowed as his eyes darted across the page, each word hitting him harder than the last. The HOA was accusing him of harboring a dangerous boat, calling it a violation of community standards. They even demanded he remove it within 72 hours or face fines. His jaw tightened as he read the final line. Failure to comply will result in legal escalation and potential repossession action. He stood frozen on the porch, the words swirling in his mind. His naval patrol boat, the one he had legally purchased, registered, and carefully maintained, was being labeled as a threat. He could barely process the absurdity. It wasn't some broken vessel left rusting on the street. It was parked properly in storage near the dock, licensed and inspected. How could they even dare call it unsafe? His mind raced back to the years he had spent serving in the Navy, long nights on the ocean, the smell of salt and fuel, the endless training. He had earned that boat, not only with money but with blood and sweat. It was more than a possession. It was a piece of his history, a reminder of discipline, sacrifice, and pride. And now these neighbors led by that woman, Karen, thought they had the right to take it away. He crumpled the letter in his fist, anger burning in his chest. But beneath the anger was confusion. How did they even know about the patrol boat? It wasn't parked in the street. It wasn't on public display. He had been careful. He had moved it to the dock quietly. He had never boasted about it at meetings. Very few even knew it existed. Yet here was a letter with details too specific to be rumor. Someone had been watching. Someone had been digging. And in his mind he could already see her face. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. The one who relished in making life miserable for anyone she didn't like. She had tried to fine neighbors for painting their doors slightly off color. She had forced a family to remove their treehouse because she said it was structurally unsafe. She lived for control, and now she had found a bigger target. His fists clenched tighter. He walked inside his house and tossed the letter onto the table, pacing back and forth. His dog lifted its head from the couch, sensing his unease. He sat heavily in a chair, staring at the letter again, trying to calm his racing mind. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about HOA rules. This was personal. Karen must have heard about his naval background, must have seen the boat one way or another, and in her twisted mind, she decided it was hers to claim or destroy. He poured himself a glass of water, his hands still trembling. He read the letter again, line by line. Searching for flaws, for loopholes, the HOA claimed it violated community safety. But what did that even mean? The boat was not armed. It was not operational for military use. It was restored for personal recreation and historical preservation. He had documents proving every part of it was legal, inspected, and registered. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous it sounded. But the threat of fines and repossession made his blood boil. They were trying to scare him, to push him into compliance. He leaned back, closing his eyes, breathing deep, memories of his Navy days flooding his mind. He remembered commanding respect in every port, knowing that his crew trusted him, knowing he had faced storms far worse than this. But still, this felt personal in a way those storms never did. Because this wasn't the ocean testing him, it was neighbors, it was pettiness wrapped in legal threats, and that made it more insulting. He stood again, grabbing the letter, smoothing out the crumples. He read the signatures at the bottom, HOA President. Karen L. Wright, her name bold, her power scrawled across the page like a signature of control. He could almost hear her smug voice, telling the board how unsafe his boat was, how dangerous it looked, how it didn't belong in their perfect community. He slammed the letter down, his decision forming. He would not bow to her threats, not this time. He would gather his documents, his registrations, his proof, and he would fight. But deep down he knew this was only the beginning. Karen would not stop at one letter. She would push, she would escalate. She would dig until she found a way to twist the truth. And he had to be ready. The house grew darker as the sun dipped lower. His mind still racing. His phone buzzed with a message, a neighbor's text. "Hey, saw the letter? Karen's been talking about your boat all day, says it's HOA property now." His eyes widened, his chest tightening. It was worse than he thought. She wasn't just accusing him. She was spreading the story, poisoning the neighborhood against him, claiming ownership of something that was his. He sat heavily again, staring at the screen, his pulse pounding. The fight had already begun, and if Karen wanted war, she was about to learn he was not a man who surrendered. Not to storms, not to enemies, and certainly not to her. The next evening the man walked into the HOA meeting hall with the folded letter in his hand. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Neighbors filled the chairs arranged in neat rows, murmuring among themselves. But as he entered the murmurs grew sharper. Some people glanced at him with curiosity, others with unease, a few even with judgment. It was clear the gossip had spread. Karen sat at the front table, her hair perfectly styled, her lips curled in that smug smile she wore whenever she felt powerful. A gavel rested in front of her though she tapped it lightly with her pen, savoring the attention she already had. She saw him enter and her smile widened, her eyes sparkling with triumph as if she had already won. He took a seat near the back, folding his arms, his jaw tight, waiting. The meeting began with the usual announcements, maintenance schedules, neighborhood events, budget updates. But every word felt like a thin cover for what everyone was waiting for. Finally Karen cleared her throat loudly, straightened her papers, and said in a sharp voice, "Next on the agenda, community safety violations, in particular a very serious matter involving military property being kept within our neighborhood." A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Some heads turned to look at him immediately. Others leaned closer to each other, curiosity burning. Karen's smile grew. She raised her voice. "One of our residents has been storing what he calls a naval patrol boat, an enormous vessel with clear military ties, in direct violation of our bylaws and a danger to our community's safety." Gasps escaped from some neighbors. One woman whispered, "A military boat? Here?" A man frowned. "Is that even legal?" Karen nodded eagerly, feeding on their doubt. "Not only is it illegal, it threatens the image and security of our neighborhood. Imagine what could happen if such a thing was misused. Do we want our children playing near military hardware?" She let the words hang in the air, her dramatics twisting the truth. He clenched his fists, his patience stretched thin, but he forced himself to remain calm. Karen pulled the letter from her folder and waved it. "This violation has been documented, and as HOA president, I am demanding immediate removal of this vessel within 72 hours, or the association will take action to repossess it." The crowd murmured louder, some nodding nervously, others clearly uncomfortable. He finally rose from his chair, his voice firm but steady. "That vessel is mine, legally purchased, fully registered, inspected, and cleared. It poses no danger. It is a piece of history, not a weapon. And you, Karen, have no authority to call it unsafe." The room fell quiet. For a moment, eyes darting between them, Karen's smile tightened but didn't fade. She raised her chin, her tone mocking. "Of course you'd say that. But what proof do you have, and why should we believe you, after all? Who needs a naval patrol boat in a neighborhood like ours?" A few laughed nervously, but others frowned, uneasy with her tone. He pulled documents from his folder and held them up. "Here, registration, ownership, inspections, every legal clearance required. All in my name. There is nothing unsafe, nothing illegal." But Karen doesn't care about facts, she only cares about control. His words hit the crowd hard. Some neighbors nodded slowly, realizing the truth. But Karen slammed her pen on the table, her voice sharp. "Control? No, this is about safety. This is about protecting our community. And if you think you can hide behind papers, you're wrong, because I will not allow you to endanger us with your so-called history project." Her words rang with authority, but her eyes betrayed her, a flicker of satisfaction that told him this was never about safety. It was about power, about humiliating him. He took a deep breath, his voice lower but steady. "You're overstepping. And if you push this further, you'll regret it. Because this is bigger than your petty fines and fake safety claims, and I will not let you steal what's mine." The room buzzed with tension, some neighbors whispering that maybe Karen had gone too far, others still unsure. Karen smirked again, tapping the gavel sharply. "We'll see about that," she said, and in that moment he knew this was only the beginning of a fight that would drag them far beyond this hall. a fight that would end in a place she never expected. Inside a courtroom, Karen left the meeting with her head high, her heels clicking against the tiled floor as if each step was a victory march. But the man could see it in her eyes when she glanced back at him. This was not finished. It was only the beginning. The next morning flyers began appearing on doors and tucked into mailboxes, bold letters across the top reading, "Community in Danger." Beneath it was a blurry photo of his naval patrol boat taken from a distance, the angle crooked but clear enough to show its size. Karen had written paragraphs in dramatic language claiming it was a threat to property values, a safety risk for families, and even hinting that it could bring federal trouble into the neighborhood. By midday, whispers ran through the streets. Neighbors standing on sidewalks talking in low voices, some shaking their heads in concern, others frowning in confusion. Children pointed at the flyers, asking their parents what it meant. The man stood at his window, watching as a group of neighbors gathered near the community park. Karen stood in the center like a preacher, waving a flyer in her hand, her voice carrying, "Do we want this in our neighborhood? A military boat sitting near our homes, making us look like some war zone, attracting attention we don't need." Some nodded, fear flickering in their eyes. Others looked uncertain. He clenched his fists, feeling the sting of her lies spreading like fire. That evening he walked down to the marina where his boat rested, the sun glinting off its steel frame, a piece of history that he had cared for, maintained, and respected. It stood silent, strong, a symbol of service, not danger. He ran his hand along its railing, the memories of long deployments flooding his mind. How many storms it had endured, how many missions it had completed, and now Karen was twisting it into something ugly, a weapon to be feared, not a vessel to be honored. He knew he couldn't let her win, but she was already pulling people into her orbit. Later that night his phone buzzed with another message, this time from a neighbor he trusted. "Karen's planning something bigger. She says the HOA has the right to reclaim the boat as community property. Watch your back." His jaw tightened, his blood boiling. She wasn't just spreading rumors anymore. She was planting the idea that she had ownership. The audacity made his chest burn with anger. He stormed into his office, pulled open his cabinet, and spread out every document he had. Registration papers, proof of purchase, federal clearance documents, photographs of him beside the boat during his service years. He stacked them neatly, preparing for the fight he knew was coming. Yet part of him wondered how far she was willing to go. The next day his fears were answered when he walked outside and found 3 men in uniforms walking through the street carrying clipboards. Karen stood proudly beside them, pointing toward his house and gesturing dramatically, her voice loud enough for half the street to hear. "Yes, right there, that's the man with the boat. It's unsafe, it doesn't belong here, and the HOA will be taking it into custody." Neighbors peeked out of their windows, some even stepping onto their porches, their eyes wide with shock. He walked straight toward her, his voice calm but laced with fire. "That boat is mine, Karen, legally mine, and no amount of lies will change that." She smirked, tilting her head like she had already won. "We'll see what the HOA bylaws have to say about it. You can't hide behind your little papers forever." The crowd buzzed with whispers. The men with clipboards scribbled notes. And in that moment he knew Karen was escalating faster than he had imagined. She wasn't just spreading rumors now. She was building a case, one twisted and false, but dangerous nonetheless. He turned away, his mind racing, his heart pounding. This was more than petty harassment. This was war, and she had just declared it. The morning was quiet until the sound of a heavy truck echoed through the street. The man stepped onto his porch and froze. A tow truck rumbled toward the marina road. Behind it another smaller truck carried chains and equipment, and walking proudly in front of them was Karen, her sunglasses perched high, her smile wide as if she were leading a parade. Neighbors peeked from their yards, some recording on their phones, others whispering nervously. The man's chest tightened as he realized what she was about to do. She wasn't just talking anymore, she was making her move. He strode quickly down the sidewalk, his boots striking the pavement hard. The tow truck pulled up near the marina fence where his naval patrol boat rested. The workers climbed out with casual confidence, one unrolling chains, the other examining the hitch. Karen pointed like a commander on a battlefield. "There it is, hook it up and move it out. This vessel is under HOA authority now." The workers hesitated, glancing at the massive boat, its steel hull glinting in the sun. This is bigger than what we usually deal with. Are you sure this is right?" Karen waved her hand dismissively, her voice sharp. "Don't ask questions, You're being paid to move it. Just do your job. It doesn't belong to him anymore. The man pushed through the small crowd that had gathered, his voice booming. Stop right there. None of you touch that boat. The workers froze, their eyes flicking between him and Karen. She stepped forward with her smug grin. You don't make the rules here, I do. This is community property now, and it's being removed for safety. He held up his phone, already recording, his voice steady but cold. This boat is legally mine, fully registered, and if you or anyone else tries to touch it, you'll be charged with attempted theft, and every second of it is being recorded. The crowd gasped. The workers shifted uncomfortably, one lowering his chains slowly. Karen's smile faltered, but she raised her voice louder to cover it. You think filming will save you? You think your little documents mean anything? The HOA has authority over all property in this neighborhood, and I am the president. Her arrogance rang out, but whispers in the crowd began turning, some neighbors muttering, she's going too far, another saying, that boat looks official, maybe she's lying. He stepped closer to her, his eyes locked on hers, his voice sharp. You don't have authority over what you don't own. You don't have authority to steal, and today you crossed a line you can't step back from. Karen's face reddened, her composure cracking as she turned to the workers, shouting, do it now, hook it up before he stops you. But the workers didn't move, their eyes wide, sweat beading on their foreheads. One shook his head. This feels wrong, we could get in trouble. Karen hissed at him. I'll protect you, you'll be fine. But her words no longer carried weight. The man pulled out his folder from under his arm, flipping it open and holding the documents high. Here's proof, state registration, federal clearance, ownership in my name. If you even scratch that boat, you'll be liable for damages worth more than your paychecks for the year. The workers stepped back quickly, shaking their heads, muttering apologies, loading their equipment back into the truck. Karen's eyes went wide, her hands clenched at her sides. Cowards. She spat, but her voice cracked. The man lowered his papers and stared at her, calm but firm. This isn't about safety, it's about control. And you just tried to steal from me in front of the whole neighborhood. Everyone saw it. Cameras from neighbors' phones pointed straight at her, her face red, her words stumbling. She turned sharply and stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. The trucks drove away slowly, the crowd buzzing with shocked whispers. The man stood tall by his boat, his calm presence stronger than ever. He knew Karen wouldn't stop here, but now he had her attempt recorded, and when the time came, those chains she tried to throw around his boat would become the very chains that dragged her into court. The next morning the man was sipping his coffee when flashing red and blue lights reflected through his window. He set the mug down slowly, his jaw tightening. Outside, 2 police cruisers rolled to a stop in front of his driveway. Neighbors peeked through curtains, some even stepping onto their porches. He stepped outside calmly, his hands in plain sight, but his eyes sharp. Karen was already there, striding up with a stack of papers in her hand and that same smug smile stretching across her face. She pointed at him dramatically, her voice raised so everyone could hear. Officers, that's the man. He's illegally storing a military vessel in this neighborhood. He refuses to comply with HOA rules. He's a danger to us all. One officer looked at her, then at him, their brows furrowed. Sir, is there a naval patrol boat on your property? The man nodded calmly. Yes, and it is legally mine, fully registered and cleared. I have documents proving ownership and federal approval. Karen scoffed loudly, cutting in. Don't believe him, he forged them. No civilian should own something like that. It belongs to the community now. I'm requesting you to seize it immediately. Gasps came from the gathering crowd of neighbors. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One finally turned to her. That's not how property law works. We can't seize anything without a legal order. Karen shoved her papers forward. Here, HOA bylaws, it gives us authority over community safety. Read it, it's clear. He's violating rules and putting us all at risk. The officer took the papers reluctantly, flipping through them, his face expressionless. The man pulled his own folder from under his arm, his tone steady but commanding. And here is my registration, title, inspection, and clearance, signed by the state and recognized federally. Every seal and signature is authentic. You'll see the difference between HOA gossip and legal fact. The officer compared both sets of papers, his expression shifting quickly as he realized hers were baseless. He glanced back at Karen. These HOA bylaws don't override state property laws. This doesn't give you the right to claim ownership. Karen's face flushed red, her voice rising in desperation. You don't understand. It looks dangerous. It doesn't belong here. It could attract criminals. It could be a weapon. The officer raised his hand, cutting her off. Unless you can show us a court order. This man is within his rights. Your complaint doesn't hold legal ground. The man crossed his arms, his voice calm but with an edge of fire. She tried to steal it yesterday with tow trucks. I have video evidence. Neighbors witnessed everything. She is harassing me and spreading false claims. The crowd buzzed, some neighbors nodding in agreement, one even calling out, "It's true, we saw it. She went too far." Karen spun around angrily, her eyes wild. Lies, all of you. You're just covering for him. But I'll prove it in court. I'll drag him there if I have to. Her voice cracked as she shouted, her once perfect composure crumbling under the weight of witnesses and the calm truth standing against her. The officers exchanged a look, then turned to the man. Sir, we suggest you keep those documents handy. This may not be the last time she pushes this issue. But for now, you're in the clear. Karen stomped her foot like a child denied candy, her glare burning into him. This isn't over, you'll regret defying me. She hissed before storming off. The crowd parted as she passed, their whispers louder now, no longer fearful but mocking her arrogance. The man stood tall, his folder in his hand, his voice steady as he looked around. Let her take it to court. Because when she does, the truth will destroy her. And in that moment he knew the fight was heading exactly where it needed to go, into a courtroom where Karen's lies would finally collapse under the weight of the law. The letter arrived just a week later, crisp white paper with bold black ink, stamped with the county court seal. The man unfolded it at his kitchen table, reading the words slowly, his eyes narrowing. Karen had officially filed a lawsuit against him and the HOA was backing her claim, accusing him of storing military-grade equipment in violation of community rules. His stomach tightened but his hands remained steady. He had expected this move. Karen was too stubborn to back down after being embarrassed in front of the neighbors and the police. He placed the letter carefully beside his growing folder of documents, then leaned back in his chair, thinking. This wasn't just an HOA squabble anymore. This was war on paper, in front of a judge, and if Karen wanted to fight there, he was more than ready. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood, whispers echoing at mailboxes and on sidewalks. Did you hear? Karen suing him. Some shook their heads, others smirked as if they were watching a drama unfold. A few even avoided his gaze, afraid to pick a side, but he ignored them, focusing on preparation. He contacted his attorney, a calm, sharp man with years of experience dismantling weak cases. Together they went through every detail. The attorney smirked as he flipped through Karen's complaint. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. This is full of exaggerated language and no legal foundation, but will need to be thorough, because she'll try to spin it into something dramatic. The man nodded, his voice firm. I have everything, every receipt, every clearance, every photo, even video of her trying to steal it. She won't be able to twist her way out. As the court date drew closer, Karen's arrogance grew louder. She marched through the neighborhood bragging. Going to lose everything. The judge will side with me. The boat will finally belong to the HOA, and we'll be rid of that eyesore. Her words spread like poison. But behind closed doors some neighbors began to doubt her, remembering how she had lied before. The morning of the hearing arrived. The man walked into the courthouse in a clean suit, his shoulders straight, his folder tucked firmly under his arm. Karen was already there, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor, flanked by two HOA board members who looked less confident than she did. Her smile flashed briefly when she saw him, but he noticed the tightness in her eyes, the flicker of nervousness she tried to hide. Inside the courtroom the air was tense. The judge entered, her gavel striking sharply as the room rose and sat again. Karen's lawyer stood quickly, painting the boat as a monstrous danger, a threat to the peace of the community. He waved HOA bylaws dramatically, claiming the association had every right to reclaim the vessel for safety. The judge listened quietly, her expression neutral. When the lawyer finished, Karen leaned back smugly, glancing at the man as if she had already won. But then his attorney rose, calm and precise. Your Honor, the plaintiff has presented nothing but speculation and fear. Here are the facts. He handed over neatly organized binders, state registration, purchase records, photographs, inspection reports, federal documents bearing seals and signatures. The man himself was called to the stand, his voice steady as he spoke. This boat is mine, legally purchased, properly stored, and fully cleared. I served in the Navy. I restored it as a piece of history, not as a weapon, and I have never once endangered my neighbors with it. The real danger is the harassment I have faced from the HOA and its president, including an attempted theft recorded on video. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as the footage played, showing Karen shouting orders at tow truck drivers, demanding they remove the boat, her voice shrill, her face twisted in arrogance. Karen squirmed in her seat, her earlier confidence cracking. The judge's eyes narrowed, tapping her pen against the bench. So, Mrs. Wright, you attempted to remove this man's property without legal grounds. Karen stammered, her words tumbling over themselves. I was acting for the safety of the community. It was necessary. The judge's tone grew colder. Necessary is not the same as legal, and what I see here is a blatant abuse of authority. The man sat calmly, his heart steady, knowing the truth was finally shining through. The court battle had only just begun, but already the tide was turning, and Karen's empire of lies was beginning to crumble under the weight of her own arrogance. Karen sat stiff in her chair, her hands clenched tightly together, her lawyer whispering frantically in her ear. But the judge's expression remained cold and sharp. The man sat calm at the defense table, his folder neatly stacked, his presence steady like a rock in a storm. The judge called for more evidence and his attorney laid it out piece by piece: receipts for maintenance, photographs showing the boat docked legally, inspection certificates signed by state officials. Each page struck like a hammer against Karen's claims. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs. Neighbors who had come to watch shifted in their seats, whispering to each other, their doubts about Karen growing stronger. Her lawyer tried to regain ground, waiving the HOA bylaws again, insisting the board had the right to enforce community standards. But the judge cut him off sharply. Community standards do not override property law. You cannot seize what you do not own. Mrs. Wright is treading on dangerous ground here. Karen's face flushed red. She rose suddenly, her voice high and cracking. But it doesn't belong here. It looks dangerous. People are afraid. I am protecting my neighborhood. The judge slammed her gavel once, silencing the room. Sit down, Mrs. Wright. This court is not interested in fearmongering. It is interested in facts. Karen sank back into her chair, her chest rising and falling quickly, her earlier confidence now shattered. The man watched silently, his eyes steady, knowing she was unraveling in front of everyone. His lawyer spoke again, calm and controlled. Your Honor, beyond the lack of legal standing, my client has faced harassment, defamation, and attempted theft. Here is sworn testimony from multiple neighbors who witnessed Mrs. Wright ordering tow truck operators to illegally remove his property. Statements were handed to the judge, signed and dated, confirming the truth. The judge's frown deepened, her voice heavy. This is more than a civil dispute, Mrs. Wright. This borders on criminal conduct. Karen's lawyer paled, flipping through his papers desperately, muttering something about misunderstanding. But the damage was done. The spectators leaned forward. The tide fully turned. The man remained calm, not gloating, not smiling, simply waiting, his patience stronger than Karen's fury. The judge announced that closing arguments would be heard the next day. The court dismissed for the afternoon. Karen stormed out, her heels striking the marble like gunshots, her face twisted with rage. This isn't over. She hissed at him as she passed, her voice shaking more with fear than confidence. He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because the courtroom was already seeing her for who she truly was. And tomorrow, when the gavel came down, she would no longer be the queen of the neighborhood. She would be a liar crushed under the weight of her own arrogance. The next morning the courtroom was packed, every seat filled with neighbors, reporters, and curious onlookers who had heard about the strange case of an HOA president trying to seize a naval patrol boat. The man entered in his steady stride, his suit neat, his folder tucked firmly in his hand, his calm presence making people turn their heads as he took his seat. Karen entered moments later, her face pale but her lips pulled into a forced smile, her heels clattering as if she could still command respect. But the whispers around her made it clear the crowd was no longer on her side. When the judge entered and the gavel struck, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Closing arguments began. Karen's lawyer tried desperately to spin the case, his voice high and shaky. Your Honor, while my client may have acted boldly, her actions were for the good of the community. The presence of such a vessel creates fear, lowers property values, and endangers residents. The judge's expression did not change, her pen scratching slowly across the page. Then the man's attorney rose, his voice calm but cutting. Your Honor, this is not about fear. This is about facts. My client's boat is legally his, properly registered, inspected, and maintained. This case has never been about safety. It has been about power, harassment, and a blatant attempt to steal property that does not belong to the HOA or its president. He gestured toward Karen, his words ringing in the silent room. This court has seen the video, has heard the testimony, has read the documents, and it is undeniable that Mrs. Wright acted without legal authority, and in doing so caused damage to my client's reputation, peace of mind, and property rights. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing at Karen. Mrs. Wright, you abused your role as HOA president. You lied, you attempted theft, and you weaponized fear against one of your own residents. This court will not tolerate such behavior. Karen shifted in her seat, her face red, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. Your Honor, please, I only wanted to protect. But the judge slammed her gavel once, silencing her. Enough, the law is clear. You had no authority, and your actions were reckless and harmful. The judge's voice grew sharper. This court rules in favor of the defendant, and Mrs. Wright is hereby ordered to pay $350,000 in damages for harassment, attempted theft, and defamation. Gasps erupted in the courtroom, the sound of shock and awe spreading like a wave. Karen's eyes went wide, her face drained of color. She shook her head violently. No, that can't be. You can't do this. I was protecting the community. But the gavel came down again, final and cold. This case is closed. The man sat still, his expression calm, his hands folded. He didn't need to gloat or smile. The weight of justice had spoken for him. Karen slumped in her chair, her perfect posture broken, her lawyer whispering frantically to her, but she no longer heard. The neighbors whispered loudly now, some shaking their heads, others smirking, one muttering. She finally got what she deserved. As the man stood and walked toward the exit, people stepped aside, some nodding to him with quiet respect, others patting his shoulder as he passed. He didn't stop, didn't linger. He simply walked out into the sunlight, his heart steady, the battle over, the truth victorious. Behind him Karen sat shattered, the gavel's echo still ringing in her ears, a sound she would never forget. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By the evening everyone knew that Karen had lost in court and had been ordered to pay $350,000. The man returned home quietly, parking his truck in the driveway. But he could feel the shift in the air. Neighbors who once looked at him with suspicion now came out of their houses, some offering small nods, others giving him cautious smiles. One older man walked over slowly, his voice low but respectful. We saw what happened. You handled yourself with dignity. You showed her what truth really looks like. The man simply nodded, thanking him before heading inside. But behind the curtains he could see people whispering, their tones no longer filled with fear of his boat but with relief that someone had finally stood up to Karen. Meanwhile Karen herself had vanished from public view. Her blinds stayed shut, her car unmoved in the driveway. Her once proud yard where she had hosted HOA gatherings now looked unkempt, weeds starting to grow as if her control had crumbled with the judgment. Neighbors whispered about her everywhere, at the grocery store, by the mailboxes, in hushed tones on evening walks. She thought she was untouchable. One woman said, "Now she's buried in debt." Another chuckled, "I heard her board members resigned after the trial. No one wants to stand with her anymore." The man kept to himself, never bragging, never gloating. But inside he felt a quiet satisfaction, not because of the money, but because justice had been served and her arrogance had finally met its match. The boat remained where it had always been, resting steady at the marina, its hull gleaming in the sunlight, no longer whispered about as a danger but admired as a piece of history. Some neighbors even asked him questions. Curiosity replacing fear. Did you really serve on one like that? What was it like on the ocean? For the first time in months, their voices carried respect instead of suspicion, and he answered them simply, never boasting, only sharing small truths. Karen's presence, however, was now a shadow. Her once constant patrols of the neighborhood with clipboards and cameras had ended. Children played freely in their yards without a sharp voice scolding them. Families painted their doors the colors they liked without worrying about fines. The HOA meetings grew quiet, almost empty, with no one willing to take her seat of power. It was as if her downfall had freed the community, though whispers still carried bitterness. She deserves worse than fines, someone muttered. She ruined people for years, and now she knows how it feels. The man didn't add to their talk, he only walked past with calm eyes, his presence enough to remind them that some battles are fought with patience and truth, not shouting or arrogance. Late one evening as he walked his dog past Karen's house, he saw her through a crack in the blinds, sitting at her table, her head buried in her hands, piles of unopened envelopes stacked beside her, her empire of control reduced to silence and debt. He kept walking without a word, because there was nothing left to say. The fight was over, the neighborhood had changed, and everyone knew it, not because he sought revenge, but because he had chosen to stand firm, and in the end, it was enough.